All right, what's up? Good afternoon. This is Tech Teacher Support. I am Chris, and welcome back to Let's Build an App. This is part 2. If you missed part 1, we streamed that earlier this morning. It is on demand on our YouTube channel. You can just back up a video. And in that video, we went over some of the setup, and we just actually got sort of our first thing sort of set up on our app, and we're going to take off from there. So let's just do a quick overview, and then we'll dive right in. So number 1, we are building an app today. We are going to make an app that you can run on your iPad or iPhone or iPod Touch. It's an iOS app. We are going to build that with a coding language called Swift, and we are going to use an app called Xcode to build that. So we're going to build the buttons and the switches and everything. Real quick, on my screen, let me pull this up. This is going to be what our app will look like. So it is called Color Mix, and it is an app that brings together a lot of different fundamentals with building Swift iOS apps. Specifically, user interface, such as these sliders and buttons, and what's called actions and outlets. And we are going to build this. And I think this is one of the best apps to build for your first app for 2 main reasons. Number 1, it is interactive, so you can actually click and move and see your code actually run live, right? It is awesome when you have it on your phone or your iPad. And that's the other thing. Having an app that you put on your personal device so you can show others and work on it is really cool. I also like this app because you can do a lot of user interface changes, right? You can change where the buttons and sliders are, how things look and feel. So there's a lot of different ways you can go with this app. We are going to build it according to the book. So we are following along. I'm going to hide this for us. We are following along in this book right here, and you see it above me. This is Intro to App Development with Swift. And you're going to want to get this book to follow along with us. And you can get that from the bookstore on a Mac. And so this is the bookstore, and we are on chapter 17. And the reason we skipped 16 chapters is because I think if you're going to just try your hand at building an app, this is a really good first app to build. So let's pick up right here. What we did is we kind of did an overview. We went through, and I believe we got to about the 2nd page. So we're going to pick up where we left off. Again, watch that first video if you want to catch up to where we are, but here's where we're at. Right here, we have dropped ourselves into Xcode. So I'm going to go down here, and I'm going to pull Xcode back up, and let's look at this again real quick. A couple things are on the screen. Over here on the left, we found out this is called our project Navigator. So these are all the files that make up our app. And these sort of came with the template when we hit Start App, right? We are in what's called main.storyboard, and this is the user interface of your app. So this is where we're going to put the buttons and the sliders. All right. Now that you're on main storyboard, on your screen, you should see a representation of your iOS device. In this case, what you're seeing is our iPad screen. And I showed you real quick down here, you can click on device, and you can switch that over to the device that you personally own. That way, what you see on your screen and what you're building is going to directly translate to your iPhone 8 or your iPad 11-inch, whatever it may be. So when I code with students, I always like them to make sure that they're building on the device that they're using. All right. And finally, we have our iPad hooked up over here, and we have that connected with a cable. And that is when we do some building and we want to test our app, we're going to test it right here on our iPad, as opposed to a simulator or testing it some other way. I always feel it's best if students put it right on their personal device and can interact with it. So there's where we're at. You have caught up with us. We are in Xcode. We are in the main storyboard, and we are following along word for word with the intro to iOS app development. And I'm going to pull that back up. And again, we are on 17.1, and that is page 113. And it says right here, create a new Xcode project using single view application. So that's what we did. We started up Xcode and we said single view app. Okay. It then told us to name it Color Mix. Perfect. And we are actually on right here, number 4. Okay. So I'm going to zoom into this a little bit so it's easier to see. So what we did is we went to main.storyboard, and now it's telling us to go to the object library and find a view. And it says you can use the filter field to search. This is the first part that was kind of tricky for me because this window that you see is an Xcode 10 window. This looks different in Xcode 11. So already when I was going through this book, I had to kind of change, and we have to find this object library. And we have to go in there and find a view. All right, a view. And so what does that mean? That's going to be this. And again, let's look at our app real quick. The view is going to be this purple box right here. The view is what is going to change color depending on what your sliders and buttons do. So that's the first thing we're going to add is this square view. Of course, it's more of a rectangle in my app. You can make it any size you want. That's what we need to add first. And that is called a view. Find a view in the object library. Okay. So here we are at Xcode. Here's our main.storyboard. And it says go to the object library and find view. Well, the object library used to be right down here. I mean, it's been there for the last 5 versions of Xcode or more. You used to click a little thing here and see your objects. So where is it? Aha. You got to do a little digging. You're just going to go straight up. And you're going to see this plus button up here. Very nondescript plus button. What is that plus button adding to our project? It's going to add an object. So you want to hit the plus, and that will add an object from what's called your object library. All right. I'm going to zoom into that plus button up here. It is right up here at the top. So I'm going to click on that. And here's what opens up. And this can be a little unwieldy depending on the size of your screen. But the object library is now a floating palette over top of your project. And I've seen lots of students get hung up on this. What we're going to do is we're going to find a view, and we're going to drag it over, and this window should disappear. All right? So as you can see, this is called our object library. And you can already see some very familiar objects, right? Buttons, sliders, switches, right? As you scroll through here, there are all sorts of pre-made things that you can use. So you don't need to make your own switch. It's already done. You don't need to make your own slider. So what we first need to do is find what's called a view. And so right up here, I'm going to type in V-I-E-W. And there are a lot of views, right? Activity, progress, image view, I'm guessing is probably what we want. So let's go back and just double check that that is what we want. Just view, nothing else. Look at that, just view. Represents a rectangular region in which it draws and receives events. Perfect. So let's go back and let's find that view again. So I'm going to hit plus. And let's just type in view, V-I-E-W. Why would it not be alphabetical? Who knows? Maybe it is. No, view, container view, view controller, VCV. That's really goofy. But anyways, there it is. There's our view. You don't want WebKit view or image view or any of the others, just view. We're going to drag that over and then drop it onto our storyboard. And however you need to position your window to do that. So I'm going to click on View, right? And I'm going to drag it over and drop it. All right. Now you see something that just happened. Those blue lines came up. If you've ever used Photoshop or desktop publishing software or maybe some website software, as you're dragging this image around, it's going to help you find these sort of horizontal center and the vertical center. So if you very specifically wanted this to be in the exact middle of the page, you could line it up. If you wanted a little higher in the page, but you still want it to be centered, you can drag it until that blue line appears, and then you can let go. And then it has these familiar little drag boxes around it. Those boxes will let you sort of manipulate the size and shape of that. But for now, we're going to keep it just the way it is. The tricky part is that it's white, so is our background. So if I click off of it, you're going to see this little blue outline on it, just to let you know it's there. Okay. So again, we went up to our object library and we found that view and we dragged it over. When you're done with the object library, you can hit that plus button again and it'll go away. It'll also go away each time you drag something over. So all of a sudden on the screen, a bunch of extra stuff just showed up over here on the right-hand side. And so you notice when you select an object, directly over here to the right are what's called its attributes or properties, right? So whether it be an image or a view or a button, you can make changes to that button or image using these properties over here, these attributes. And we're going to go in and make some changes to some things later. But that is the sort of final of the three screens. So you got your project navigator, your main work area, and then your sort of attributes and options over here. Okay, good job. You added your first object library object, and we are finally done with number 4. So we found this view, we put it in. Let's switch over to page 115. It says drag the view onto the controller scene, use the guides to align it. We did that. Number 6, a white on white background is hard to see. Choose editor, canvas, show bounds rectangles to display an outline. Well, that's probably why mine already displays an outline, but let's show you how you can get your object to have an outline around it. And it says choose editor, canvas, show bounds rectangles. Okay, editor, canvas, show bounds rectangles. Let's go back to Xcode. And we're going to go up here to editor, canvas, bounds rectangles. So mine was already turned on. If yours isn't, I would turn that on. That way you don't lose your objects with the background because they're the same color. All right. And by doing that, as we can see, we have this nice little blue outline. So whether I'm selected it or not, I can still see where it's at. All right, perfect. Let's go back to our book. Now it says to open the Assistant Editor by going to View, Assistant Editor, Show Assistant Editor. If you can't see it, make sure the jump bar at the top looks like this, and they give you kind of an image. All right. Here's what's happening. As you build your app and the way you want it to look, you're going to have to start writing some code, right? So when I hit a button or move a slider, we're going to have to write some code to make that work. It's helpful to see your iPad here and your code at the same time. So we are going to add now a 5th section of Xcode to the screen. So it's going to get a little much, and that's why I said that growth mindset. Don't get overwhelmed. We're just going to add a sort of another vertical section here. All right. And the way you do that is you need to see what's called your assistant editor. And I'm going to go up to View. Nope. I bet I go to Window. Nope. Editor. Aha. The editor window. I mean, trust me, I do this all the time. I hunt around for things that I've probably clicked a million times, but it's muscle memory. And so when you're doing it slow like this, right here under editor, you have this, the assistant editor. And you may wonder what all this hieroglyphics is right here. That is Control, Option, Command, Return. Control, Option, Command, Return. So that is the key command, but we're just going to click this. I'm going to pull this off so you can see what happens. So I'm going to say Editor, Assistant, and there we go. So now we have split our window even again. So let's look at this real quick. Again, over here is our project Navigator. Here's all of our storyboard files. Here's the actual iPad that's been shrunk down into this little screen. Here's all of the code now. We're going to start writing some code. And it's going to go over here. And then again, these are all these sort of attributes of the objects. So this is when you start doing a little bit of window jockeying around, right? You got to kind of condense and move these around. So here's what I like to do. You'll notice our project Navigator over here, there's a lot of unused space, right? So if you bring your mouse right here, you can click, you can kind of bring that over. So we saved a little bit of room there. We can do that same thing here. We can click, we can kind of bring that over, right? We can also do the same thing over here. Well, that's as far as that one goes. All right. We can move our code in a little bit there. And then just so we have our whole iPad on the screen, I like to go down here and sort of shrink that up a little bit. Just so, and again, I'm using 2 fingers, kind of doing the pinch. I personally like seeing the whole iPad on the screen at the same time, so it can be right there. Okay. So now we've added, this will be it. We're not adding the 6th vertical pane to Xcode, but you will occasionally be pulling up the code assistant to work on your user interface objects. Okay, let's go back to the book. We have pulled up our assistant editor. Open the assistant editor. If you can't, there's a picture of what it should look like. So we are on number 8. And this is super tricky. This is something that you just gotta know. There's no other way around it. We need to connect this square that we drew in. We need to connect that over to our code. All right, and that's going to be our first main idea, and that's going to be called an outlet. So it'll make more sense in a little bit. But we're building 2 things today, actions and outlets. All right, we're going to start with an outlet because this square, this needs to change color as we move our sliders around, right? And so the code is going to need to update this square constantly with the new color. So we're going to create what's called an outlet. And I'm going to zoom into this real quick because this is a tricky concept. Once you know it once in Xcode, you'll be fine, but it can be hard to remember and even trickier to find if you don't know what you're doing. So we're going to do number 8, which is Control Drag, which is hold down the Control key, then click and drag with the mouse from the view into the code. And then it tells you to call it Color View and click Connect. Okay. So you see this Control Drag. So when you're on a Mac, and you can't see, oh, here's that Mac keyboard right here. When you're on a Mac, you have a control button right here because most Mac mice, right, only have one button. They don't have a right and left key. It's goofy. But on a Mac, you can't right-click because there is no right-click button. Now, if you're on a laptop, you can by using 2 fingers. And you can also do this by holding the control button to synthesize a right-click. So that's what's happening. They want you to right-click and drag from the box into the code. Of course, if you don't have a right-click on your mouse, you would have to hold the control button. And that's what they're telling you there. So that can be a little tricky. Let's go back to Xcode and see exactly what they're saying to do. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit here. We have our view box. So this is what's going to change colors as we move our switches. And we have our code over here. This is the code that runs when your app starts up. Obviously, it starts up here at line 1 and it goes through line 21 here. We need to add some pieces to this. And what we need to do is we need to connect this box to our code by doing that control click it just showed us. So I'm going to hold down control on my menu, on my keyboard, and I'm going to click my mouse, and you see what happens there is it draws this blue line, and then it kind of gives you a target of where you want that to insert into your code. And right there it says insert outlet or outlet collection. So it knows you want to create an outlet. It just wants to know where you want to put it. You know, you could put it up here on line wherever. I find it easiest to kind of bring it down here to the bottom. For example, line 18. Okay. The reason I do that is because I don't want to mess with all the code that's already written. So you can see there's some pre-existing code. The code within the brackets is going to run, and then the next set of brackets is going to run. So we don't want to put our code inside some code that's already written. Just to make that sound easy, you want to give this code kind of its own line, right? And we're going to drop all the way down to sort of the end of it. Now, you don't want to go beyond line 19 here. You don't want to go beyond this last little bracket. That's the end of the code. So you don't want to go past that. This is kind of the symbol that says code done. So somewhere here like line 17 or 18 is a perfect spot to put that. And now when you let go of your mouse, when you drag that over and let go, this window pops up and it says, hey, we see you're making an outlet connection. Cool. Why don't you give it a name? All right. Now they told us what name, and I believe it was color mix. So let's go back and look at that. So it says color view. Makes more sense anyways. Enter color view in the name field and click connect. Okay. So right here we have this name, and we're going to need to call it that because as we reference it in our code, it needs to have a name. We need to call this thing square or rectangle or color square, whatever. They want us to call it color view, so let's be consistent so we can follow along with the book. Color, capital V, I-E-W. That's called camel case. When you're writing code, you want to not use spaces. And because you don't use spaces, when there's multiple words, you just capitalize the first letter of each word. So color view, the V is capitalized because that starts the second word. It is a UI view. Don't worry about this weak button. We're just going to hit connect. Okay, and let's look at what just happened. Just wrote some code for us. It says, hey, here's an outlet that you just made. You've named it color view, and it is a user interface view. All right? So that's sort of the code that just got written when we made that action. And one last time to just practice, remember you're going to hold control and click on this and drag it over, right? That always really gets me and the students the first time. If you haven't coded in a while and you come back, you forget how you make that connection, and I got to Google it, and oh, that's right. So there you go. We have made our first connection. We have made what's called an outlet, and we have written or the computer has written for us, our first line of code, which is awesome. The more the computer can do for us, the better. The less code I have to write, the more it will write for me, the better. Let's go check out our book, because we're on a roll here. This is really good. Okay. And yes, there is the code that was written. And here's what you're seeing from left to right. And so it kind of gives you a little more in-depth of what just happened. This can be tricky because it's not really bolded out, but they have a step in here that we need to do. So it says find the function. Let's highlight that. Find the function Viewdidload. Add the following code inside the function. All right, well, that's 2 steps. So let's start with step 1. Find the function Viewdidload. All right. Well, here we are back at Xcode, and find the function Viewdidload. So what it's telling you is to look for a function within your code. And a function is like a method, or it's like a function is a series of steps that need to happen. What we're going to do is zoom into our code right here, and you'll see it right away. It says right here, func, which is the abbreviation for function, Viewdidload. So there is the function Viewdidload. And they even have a comment in here, and they tell you, do any additional setup after loading the view. So any code that we put into this, and again, it's just between these 2 brackets, right? Brackets and code kind of hold pieces of code together. And then a new set of brackets happens with a new chunk of code. So this function, Viewdidload, so that's when saying when your app loads, what are you going to see? What's going to happen? And so we need to put a little bit of code in here to start this process out. And the cool thing is it tells you what code to put. You don't have to guess. So we're going to go back here, and it's going to say, find the function Viewdidload. This function is called when your view controller is ready. So essentially when your app launches. Add the following code inside the function. Color view, background color equals black. All right. And so as you can see here on my iPad, maybe tough to see, but we've given ourselves a black background. And that's what's going to happen here. So color view, background color equals black. Now you could easily just highlight this and hit copy and then paste it over in Xcode, but I always discourage students from copying and pasting. It seems so easy to do, but trust me, the muscle memory and the actual typing in of the code does wonders for your ability to remember what you did and understand it. There's not a lot of understanding in copy paste, although I do copy paste code in projects all the time. Let's not get in the habit of it right away. So we're going to type this in. Color view, background color equals black. All right, so let's go back to our code. And if you want, you can even kind of sneak your Xcode window up a little bit so you can still see it right there. There's nothing wrong with that, right? So over here, oops, I just did undo. Sorry, redo. So over here, let's zoom in. And I'm going to go to my Viewdidload function. I'm going to hit return here and create a little space, maybe 3 returns. I don't like everything crammed together. I like to have a little breathing room with my code. All right. Now, let's type this in. So color, capital V, view. Now you see something starting to happen. If you've probably noticed this before in like your autocorrect or maybe your word processor. But what's happening is Xcode is starting to try to guess what you type, right? It knows we have something called color view. We just created it. So as we type in color V, it's like that's probably what you want. And it's going to suggest that for you. So you'll see this a lot in Xcode. It'll make suggestions thinking it knows what you're about to type, and it is just to save you some time. So I don't even have to type the EW. I could just hit enter right here, right? Sort of the same thing like autocomplete in your web address. If you're going to ESPN, you type in EES and it goes ESPN.com. It already kind of knows what you're trying to type. So that's what's going on here. All of these sort of suggestions have popped up. This is the one I want, color view. I can click on that, hit enter, and it'll fill that out for me. It is also giving it a color. We can go back through these colors more in depth, but it's kind of trying to separate the code for you into different sort of colors and blocks just to help you read it and make it a little easier to see, right? So color view, and we're going to change its background color. And so that right down here is dot background. And then because it's two words, we're going to capitalize the C, color. It also appeared in a different shade of purple. And we're going to say color view background color equals black. All right. So there is our code, our first actually written line of code. Congratulations. That is a lot. You know, it may look like reading through a book called Intro, that this should just be easy, click, boom, zing. It's actually pretty tricky to find where to get a view and to get it to connect and to write your first line of code. So congratulations. If you've made it this far, awesome. You have written some code. You're starting to build an app. If you haven't made it this far, make sure you leave us a message at Tech Teacher Support and let us know what you got hung up on. We'll make another video. We'll help you out. We'll figure this out together, right? So congratulations. We've written our first line of code. We didn't have to copy paste it either, which is awesome. We did kind of read it and type it, but that's okay. That counts. All right, so here we go. We've written our first line of code, and let's see what the book wants us to do next. All right, over here on to page 117. We get to run our app. This is awesome. All right, so here's what it's telling us. It says you changed the code to be black, but obviously it didn't change on the screen. That's because we're going to do our first what's called build and run. All right, so let's check this out. Up here at the top of the screen, you have a play button, kind of like iTunes, right? But we're not playing music, we're playing our app. All right, and so when I hit this play button, it's going to, here we go, it's going to build and then run what we've done so far. So what does that mean? Build means it's going to take all of these files and all of the code we've written and stick it together into one app. So right now this is 9 different files. We're going to be adding some sliders and buttons. That needs to just be one app, right? So that's what's going to happen. It's going to build it. It's called compile, right? And then it's going to run it. And so we're going to see it actually come over here to our iPad and run for the first time. This is really awesome. There's a couple settings, so let's go over those before we build and run for the first time. Right next to this button, you see a stop. That's if there's an error or you want to get back to coding and stop testing it, you would hit the stop button. And then right here, it's going to say, where do you want to test this? So this is the tricky part. We have actually connected up our iPad, and this sees it and says, you're going to test this on your iPad. All right. But it's totally plausible that you don't have an iPad or an iPhone or an iPod Touch, and you're just doing this on your computer to learn how to build an app. That's cool. Apple has already figured that out, and they've built what's called a simulator. So you can simulate an iPad or an iPhone right here on your computer if you don't own one, just so you can get good at building apps before you maybe even own one of these devices. Totally cool. I'm going to show you how to do that. So right here it says Chris's iPad. Let's say I want to change that. I'm going to click on that, and here we go, our list of simulators. So this lets you simulate any other device. So for example, let's say you don't own an iPhone, but you really want to build an iPhone app. You can go down here and say, what would this look like on an iPhone 11 Pro? And you can hit run and run this. But what I really highly suggest, and I think is the best for students to see, is if you hook your personal device up to Xcode and run it on that. It's a lot better than running on the simulator, only because you can interact with it, touch it, move things around versus using your mouse. That's really the main thing. So I'm going to go back to Chris's iPad here. And again, this could be its own video, but your iPad and your Mac should be sharing the same Apple ID, because you need to connect them using your Apple ID. And I don't want to bore you with all the sort of all the parts of that, but if you have problems with that, just tweet me at TechTeacherSUP, TechTeacherSUP on Twitter, and we'll figure it out. So I have hooked up my iPad, and I want to build and run this. And that might be a good place to kind of ease on out of part 2, our first build and run. So let's go up here. All right. And we're going to hit build and run. And then right here in the center, it's going to sort of update you about what's happening. It's building it, it's compiling it, it's sending it over to the iPad, and then boom, here's the iPad. So let's show you the iPad. The iPad is black. Perfect. That's what we wanted. We changed our screen background to black. Easy. But you know what? This just means that it worked. Because if it didn't, we would have got a big error that our code was wrong or we did something wrong, and it wouldn't even show up on our iPad here. So that was successful. Even though it doesn't look like much, that was very successful. We have essentially made our first user interface object, made our first outlet connection, wrote our first line of code, and just tested our app for the first time. That's a lot of milestones. That is pretty awesome. Let's keep going. We got about 10 more minutes here, 9 minutes, and let's see if we can get to the end of a chapter. Where's the end of a chapter? Oof. Okay. Yeah, let's hit the end of the chapter here. Because I think we're pretty much done. I think this is just going to talk about crashes and bugs. If you went to run your app and it wouldn't build and run, you'll get an error. It'll look kind of like a street sign error, like a yellow triangle with an exclamation point in it, right? And it'll say, hey, something went wrong, and it'll tell you what line of code something went wrong on. Wait a second. Weird. It's telling you about sliders when we haven't even made sliders yet. Odd. Anyways, that is really weird that it would tell you that before. Like right here, it shows green, blue, and red switch. Slider, slider, slider. We haven't done that yet. Anyways. Okay. Here we go. If you have a crash, no problem. Let us know. We'll help you fix it. You can send us a screenshot of your code. We can do a live stream or a Zoom or whatever it takes. We'll figure this out. All right. And we're going to go over here. It's telling you if you have a crash, it might be this, but you haven't done any of this yet. So trust me, skip it. Skip it. 17.2. This is where we're going to leave off here. We'll be back later tonight. I'm guessing 8 o'clock Eastern. That is when our office hours at night are. And we're going to go into this next part, which is my favorite. You start adding your switches. Then you can click them and things happen. That's where you get into the fun, because that's the whole point of doing this app, is interacting with it and watching it run. So, you know what we need to do? Let's update our instructions here. And let's talk about what we did real quick. Okay, so open Xcode 11. Perfect. And then we do open chapter 17 intro book. Nailed it. Number 3. First thing we did was a view object. 4 was a outlet. And then 5 was a background code. And then 6 was build and run. Heck yeah, let's save that. Ooh, a little too big. All right, so there we go. Congratulations on getting here. Probably didn't seem, maybe if you thought we'd get further, but when you really get into it, there are a lot of details that I wanted to go over. If this is your first time coding or using Xcode, I don't want to skip a lot of this stuff, right? It can be long for a reason, because we're really going into all the things that you may experience when you're doing this. So I want to say thank you very much for your time. As always, thank you for tuning in. Again, if you have any questions, you can go to our Twitter at TechTeacherSup, post your questions there. Post them in the comments below. You can go to our website, techteachersupport.com, if you need more help. If you know any teachers or students or schools that need some tech help, let them know we exist and we'll help them out. So have a great night. I will see you later for part 3, where we're going to keep building our app. It's going to be fun. I will see you then. All right, take it easy and peace.